Day 874 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at the Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 563,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,130 in the past day. Then, as for hardware losses, 7 tanks, 12 APVs, 54 artillery, and a whopping 92 motorbikes, golf carts, buhanka vans, logistical vehicles, and so on. And that's possibly a daily record. Also, given that we see an enormous amount of Russian hardware destruction in any given week, compounded by the limitations of Russia not having a bottomless Soviet stockpile that is undeniably evidenced by the older and older equipment taken out for usage, it starts to have the knock-on effect of the Russian military having to scale back its offensives in Ukraine, with the possible exception of infantry waves. Which means what we're looking at is Russia moving in the direction of hitting a critical point of exhaustion, which feels somewhat akin to the old broadband internet data plans, where if you don't go over your data limit, your internet line speed remains fast, but if you do go over your data limit, your internet line speed is forcibly slowed down or throttled, as they say. Or to rephrase all of that in my expression, Russia will go hard until they have to go home. Then headed to the map, and briefly starting in Russia as a major fire broke out at the military plant Uraltransmash in Yekaterinburg, some 1,600 kilometers from Ukraine as the crow flies. Though somewhat problematically for Russia, this is reported to be the only factory producing self-propelled artillery units. Now, as per the usual, no word on the cause of this suspicious fire. Although I would very much expect that the director of the company was already up against some impossible quotas for the production of SPGs, given that it's reportedly the only company, nay plant, to produce the equipment. So a little smoking accident could bring those impossible production quotas all the way down to a very achievable and minuscule level. And truly, it's a type of national security issue to have so much reliance on a single site for certain weapons production, especially in the current climate. Then headed all the way back to Ukraine as Russian short-range aviation strikes have continued in the northern sector, with this latest sortie used to fire upon the outer southeast of Ukrainian-held ground, on the outer edges of the embattled town of Vovchansk. Now, no discernible changes have been found on either northern fronts as of now, although there is some nuance there. As you might remember yesterday, I mentioned how the governor of Russia's Belgorod Oblast removed their own locals from 14 settlements along the border. And I mentioned that because earlier today, according to Kremlin spokesperson Peskov, where he was asking and answering his own question on whether or not Putin's May 17th stated creation of a security or sanitary zone had failed. His answer, of course, was no, and was essentially stating that everything is still going according to plan. He also managed to add in something of a confusing remark about the, quote, Kyiv regime's barbaric attacks on civilian infrastructure, which is certainly one of the most tone-deaf comments I've heard from the Kremlin or Peskov himself, given how the Kremlin has put out numerous official communications on their own regarding those very military activities that they perform, almost as if to be proud of their attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. But there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going around these days within the Kremlin, and surely a long time before that. But ultimately, the AFU will happily prefer to see a sanitary zone that's not on their side of the border. Then headed way down on the map, all the way to Vuhledar, as once again, there's been a flare-up in activity due to renewed Russian assaults in the region, just southeast of the Ukrainian-held settlement. Most recently, it was reported that there were 2 quite spectacular attempts by Russia to unload what appeared to be of raiding groups into the tree line within the grey zone. However, after what is now countless attempts by Russian forces to penetrate the settlement, Russia's consistent failures in capturing Vuhledar stem from the well-fortified Ukrainian defences and effective counterattacks, coupled with the challenging urban terrain that hampers large-scale offensive manoeuvres. Additionally, Russia is dealing with logistical issues in the region as well, which is very much due to the veritable minefield that this location is, which continues to thwart all of their offensive attempts, and seemingly dealing with a short-term memory of this battlefield environment. Then headed even further down on the map as Ukrainian sea and air drones under the SBU command launched a successful overnight attack on a Russian Coast Guard base on Lake Donuslav within occupied Crimea. The assault severely damaged key facilities including the command post, an ammunition depot, equipment storage, and enemy firing positions. And perhaps it was no coincidence, but this strike occurred during a Russian naval training exercise, effectively disrupting their operations. A source within Ukrainian intelligence emphasized that the attack demonstrates Crimea is becoming increasingly dangerous for Russian forces, noting that Moscow has been forced to withdraw much of its naval presence from the peninsula. But that's just the half of it, because Russian Telegram channels reported a major naval drone attack in Novorossiysk of Russia overnight around the same time. An increasingly dangerous time indeed. But wait, there's more, because the Partisan movement has uncovered the location of a secret Russian training center and headquarters of the main intelligence directorate of Russia in Sevastopol. The training center, disguised as a school for divers, was discovered by a Russian soldier who is reportedly an agent of the Ukrainian Partisans, which is an interesting twist to say the least. The exact coordinates of the training center were also provided, and I'll plot that on the map now. So there we go, zooming in. And additionally, the movement has identified a Russian main intelligence directorate unit operating covertly in the area, along with details of its personnel and their movements. Then further to that, the Partisans have called for those serving in the GRU unit to either prepare for surprises or collaborate with them. So that sort of announcement has to be somewhat nerve-wracking for the Russian personnel stationed there. Partisans, they are nowhere, but they are everywhere. Then taking a look around the map, because somewhere in the east we saw the Ukrainian unit Garuda continuing to focus on targeting various Russian logistics, and as the old saying goes, infantry wins battles but logistics wins wars. Then also we saw FPV operators from the 3rd Assault Brigade destroy a Russian Tulpan 240mm self-propelled heavy mortar, with this event occurring in the northeastern Kharkiv region. And this type of success by the AFU is particularly useful, given that this type of old Soviet platform is typically used for targeting fortified positions. Though with a maximum range of 19 kilometers or about 12 miles, they are becoming increasingly vulnerable to small precision Ukrainian FPV strikes, as exactly was the case with this one. Then in the east, we also saw the event of Ukrainian FPV operators actively using FPV drones to destroy Russian equipment in the north, mostly targeting supply vehicles. And as you can see with this one, it's sporting the relatively new Russian bullseye target-looking insignia. Indeed, the irony in that one. Then there was the oddity within occupied Makivka, as a Russian military KAMAZ truck with ammunition on board caught fire and blew up. No word on the cause, and though a 30-kilometer or 18-mile distance from the front lines makes it plausibly from a Ukrainian strike of some sort, it's also just as likely that the unsafe handling of munition storage was the cause for this event. But even then, that's not the only other threat that Russia has to contend with, as there is also some level of partisan activity still known to be present in the Donetsk region. In fact, Russian personnel in the region still give reports of the locals in the area not being fond of them. Which, when you think about it, is a report that flies in the face of the annexation referendums, where apparently Donetsk locals voted for the annexation in a voting landslide victory of something to the tune of 95% of the population. I doubt it very much. Then headed across to some news for today. So Ukrainian forces are developing advanced FPV drones with expanded capabilities. For instance, the AFU UAV unit Wild Hornets has unveiled a new model called Queen of Hornets. They do love their hornets. With this such inclusion, designed for multiple functions including drone delivery, signal retransmission, munition drops, and kamikaze attacks. This new generation of heavy FPV drones boasts a significant payload capacity of 9.5 kilograms, which is about 22 pounds, and an operational range of 25 kilometers. Also, the stated potential integration of AI technology could further enhance its effectiveness targeting enemy units, which I always find interesting because the race to drone AI supremacy could help determine the outcome of many wars, including this one. Then to another Russian hardware news update. So here we go, another batch of a dozen or so Russian T-62 tanks with factory installed drone huts were seen en route to the front lines. Now, according to the car's license plate in the video, this video was shot in the Republic of Bashkortostan, which is about 1,000 miles neat away from Ukraine. Then headed to some more news. So in June of this year, Ukraine imposed stricter sanctions on Russian oil giant Lukoil, effectively halting Russian crude oil deliveries to Hungary. So this action prevents Lukoil from using Ukraine as a transit country for oil exports, disrupting the flow through the southern leg of the Juzzie pipeline. Now, despite EU pipeline crude imports from Russia not being banned by the embargo, this move has cut off Hungary's primary oil supply. The Hungarian foreign minister reported recently that 80% of Hungary's crude oil came from Russia since 2022, highlighting the significance of this disruption. And Hungary, under Prime Minister Viktor Orban, has been very well known by now to maintain closer ties with Russia compared to other EU countries since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And as expected, Hungary is now working with Russia to find a legal solution to resume oil deliveries, citing energy security concerns. So in the larger picture, where we saw the vast majority of European countries ease off Russian energy, Hungary instead doubled down for some cheap rates, and evidently didn't ever perceive an energy security concern in this geopolitical landscape. Interesting. Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. And this one being quite the episode in brain spin, as most recently, Vladimir Putin linked electricity shortages in Russia to cryptocurrency miners, stating that uncontrolled energy consumption by miners has caused outages to several regions, and highlighting that this issue is already observed in Irkutsk, Buryatia, and Zabakalsky Krai, not exactly largely populated areas. So where to start on this recent news update from Putin? Well, he didn't even blame Ukraine. Also, he failed to blame the old Soviet infrastructure, which has reached the end of its service life in many areas due to a lack of long-term investment. Yep, so none of that. It's the cryptocurrency miners. Of course it is. The added irony, of course, being that Russia is one of the largest energy producers in the world. So this should be far from the case. Where it comes to these Russian realities, too much Litecoin mining, I guess. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment and subscribe if not already. Almost at that 110k mark. It would be nice. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.